Hi Nish, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm really, really well. We've had a number of apologies today, so it might just be you, me, and one other person, and that's it. But we'll just have a nice intimate chat then today. So that would be great. Hello, Alan. I hope you're doing well, my love. How are you?
Hello there.
Excellent, excellent. I was just saying to Nish, it might be just us today, because I've had a number of apologies. I think it's just people in the UK just trying to get the best out of the sun because that's it. The rest, we're not going to see it again until April, are we? Let's be honest. So I think that's all that's happening. It's actually decent weather. Okay, so you've both been here before. While we wait to see if there's anybody else who's going to join us, if you can just go into the chat and let me know what you'd like to gain from today's chat, and then that way I can make sure I cover it. So hopefully I'll be able to cover it in my presentation, but I can't read minds, unfortunately. So there might be something that you want to discuss that isn't in my presentation. So that way, if you go into the chat and let me know, it means I can make sure I cover it. So if you can go and do that, and I'll just let the room run for another minute and then we can get started. My assistant Joycey is there in the background as well, which is awesome. Okay.
I can't type. I can't see my
Oh, of
keyboard.
course you can't.
So a basic question.
Yes.
Instead of a book, I've done my life story, which is 66,000 words. I know you don't do life stories, but what's your experience of instead of doing a book, do a
Yes.
series of books, that life story in a series of books?
There's nothing wrong with that. It actually makes it more digestible. I've even had clients who they weren't writing their life stories, but what they had to say was over 100,000 pages, and I just 100,000 words, I should say, 100,000 pages. Oh my god! And I just said people don't have the attention span nowadays, you know. So if you can break it up into a series like a trilogy or something like that, yeah, absolutely, it makes a lot of sense. And you have to remember from an editing point of view, even from a design point of view, it's not going to cost a lot more. It's, do you know what I mean? It would have cost if you were doing 100,000 words in one book, it'll cost you just a little bit more if you did 33,000 words over 3 books with an editor. Or if you actually write them all together and get it over to the editor in one go, they can probably see it as one book and then it'll be the same price. So yeah, absolutely, you can do that.
Excellent. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let's get started. So Anish saying creating user personas using AI for your book and using multiple personas for a single book. How would that work? Very, very interesting. We'll cover that, Anish. We'll definitely cover that. Okay, so let's get started. So give me 2 moments. How do I share? So hopefully you can, in a moment, be able to see my screen so you can see this. Okay, excellent. So let me start this. Okay, so first of all, welcome to the Thought Leader Author Forum. You've both been here before, so you know how this works. But for anyone who's watching on the replay, it's in 2 parts. So first of all, we talk about the topic of today. So today we're talking about how to target your book audience step by step, the questions that you should be asking yourself. And if you don't know the answers, going and asking your target audience. That's one of the best forms of research you can do. And then part 2, my favorite bit of the forum, that's when I take questions from you. We can talk about audience targeting, reader personas, or anything else. So Nisha absolutely will make sure that you have your question answered by the end of today. And just to thank you for coming, you will get this workbook. Well, actually, you get 2 workbooks. You'll get these 2 workbooks sent to you by my awesome assistant, Joycey, who's in the audience today. She'll send it over to you. It's usually mid-morning or early afternoon, UK time, that she will send it across to you. But this means that if you want to take notes, you can do, but you don't have to. Everything that I discussed, the questions that you should be asking yourself and finding out about your target audience, you will actually get a fillable PDF workbook that you can work through and decipher who is your target audience. And then you get a second workbook where you actually get that information from the first workbook and turn it into a persona. This is really important because I think a lot of people do the whole deep dive into their audience thing maybe in the beginning of their business. Maybe they'll do it, and they get all excited. Maybe they worked with a brand expert. So they did this deep dive. And then they kind of lock it away somewhere and they forget about it and they just get on with their lives. The problem with that is it doesn't matter how good this is, if you don't utilize it, you might as well not even know about it. And that's what people sadly do. You know, they do this kind of deep dive into their audience, usually at the beginning of their business journey or maybe a pivot of their business journey, but then they just forget about it. I found that if you can reduce all the information you find and reduce it down to a one pager like this, what I call a reader persona, what I found with a lot of my clients is they tend to just, some of them even print it and just tack it up on the wall where they work. I had one gentleman who turned it into a screensaver, so it's on the back of his computer all the time. But I just thought that's wonderful because it means it's always at the forefront of your mind. You know who you're targeting at all times. So I found adding this extra workbook where you reduce everything down to a one pager works really well, because otherwise you do all of this amazing work and then you forget about it, which is just absolutely pointless then. Okay, so you will get that via email tomorrow. And also just to thank you for coming today, you can choose one of these amazing causes and we will donate on your behalf. In fact, let me actually put that into the chat now. So there we go. I'll put this into the chat now. So if you can go now, pick a cause, it doesn't cost you a dime. It's on my dime. So that way we're just, it's helping us understand where you would like our resources to go, what causes are important to you. Okay, so as you know, I always start my week polling my audience on LinkedIn because I always like to know how they're thinking. So I asked, if you were writing a book for thought leadership, how important is it for you to target your audience correctly? So, I mean, I'm always amazed I don't get 100%, to be honest. Who are these people? Who are these people who say, no, it's not important? This is sometimes when I do a poll, it's because I'm genuinely wanting to see how people think. Other times it's a rhetorical question. I'm not really asking. I expect 100% of people to say, yes, very important. But there's also, you know what human beings are like. You can't predict them all, can you? So there's always going to be somebody who says, no, it's not important. I always think, what? Why? Quite interesting though. For once, I had somebody who actually, one of the no camp, actually leave a comment, which was wonderful because all the other times I've done it and I've got no at 6%, 8%, 10%, those people didn't leave a comment. So I'm thinking, what do you mean no? Explain yourself. Why is it not important for you, target audience? So it was really interesting that actually somebody left a comment, which I'll go through. So Jill says, if you aren't writing for the person who will read your book, then you're writing to the wind. And we know the wind doesn't write those glowing reviews. That's very true. Wind does not write reviews. And reviews are everything. You want 4 and 5-star reviews, and that's what makes people know that this is a good book. Sabine says, yes, definitely for thought leadership, I think a targeted audience, especially as I see a book as Anne, I think that you want to say, an entry point to selling your services. This is so true. This is very, very true. This actually, I mean, I think with any kind of book, you really should be thinking about your target audience, but especially when you're writing a book for thought leadership, chances are you have a program, an organization, a business, a service, a product that you want to promote. So therefore, it's imperative that you actually target your audience. Think about it. I always say I would much rather just have 5,000 people on the planet who read my book, but they're my target audience and they want to work with me, than having 5 million people who read my book, but then just read it and they go, oh, that was nice. And then they just carry on with their lives, you know? So it's absolutely important, especially for thought leadership. If you're writing a book for thought leadership, then you definitely need to target your audience. Lyndon, this is the lady who actually commented. She said no, and I'm so happy. It's like, yes, somebody who said no who actually leaves a comment. She says, I'd want everyone to be able to access it as we're all thinkers. I really, really love the fact that she said that, because it's given me an insight as to why some people say no. Because I was thinking, why would anybody think that you shouldn't target your audience? Now I get it. Where she's coming from is she's worried that if she targets, then she will leave people out. That is one of the biggest fallacies, in not just in books, in business, that I've ever seen. And it's something that I've fallen victim of in the past. Sometimes, especially when we start out in business or when we're writing a book or anything like that, we tend to have, I call the fisherman approach, the trawling nets approach, I should say. In other words, if we can just cast our net as wide as possible, then we've got the biggest chance of getting as much fish as possible. Probably shouldn't be using that analogy as a vegan, but I couldn't really think of a vegan version of why Nish is laughing at me. But it's very true. I couldn't think. I was like, what's the vegan? As vegans, we just prefer no fish at all. They leave the fish in the sea. So, you know, I don't know if there's a vegan version, but the point I'm making is we all have this ability to think, if I just cast my net as wide as possible, I will actually get as much as possible. It actually works the other way around. The more you niche and the more specific you become, yes, you may be excluding people, but the people you include feel very seen and heard. They feel like you're speaking directly to them. They feel like, oh my God, this person gets me. And that's what people want, whatever they're doing, whether they want to have a strategic partnership with you, whether they want to do business with you, whether they want to buy from you, even be your friend, your partner, any of these things. The first step is, I really like this person gets me. How can you put any messages out there that's suitable for everybody? It'll be so generic that no one will resonate with it. It's just like, it's just a nice message. So I see exactly where Lyndon's coming from, but I would say to Lyndon, you should still target. Because yes, by targeting, you might be excluding people, but the people you include will feel very seen and heard by you. And that's what motivates them to want to come into your world and whatever it is you want from them, whether you want their business, whether you want them just to read your book, whether you want them to become a strategic partner, whether they're a journalist and you want them to feature you in their magazine or newspaper, whatever it is, people have to resonate with you first before they're willing to do anything, which is just how human beings work. So it really is all about asking the right questions. If you're thinking, okay, that's great, Mitali, you've convinced me that I need to target my audience. How on earth do I do this? It's all about asking the right questions. I think most people are now very aware that you need to know your audience. The problem is a lot of people don't know. I guess what happens is they have an idea of who their audience is. That's not good enough. You need to know your audience, really know. Even understand the language that they use, how they speak, how they think, okay? So it's all about asking the right questions, and it's never assuming. This is actually something I found quite a lot. I found that new business owners tend to be much better at this than established business owners. What I tend to find is with new business owners, they're much more open to thinking, yeah, I need to go and find out about my audience. Established business owners seem to think, oh, I've already done this. I did this a few years ago. I know my audience. Your audience changes. My audience has changed over the last few years. So you always need to keep on top of it. I would say unless you've done some kind of fact-finding exercise in the last 12 months, then you need to do it again. It's always a good idea to keep in touch with your audience and never assume what they want from you. You'll be surprised at what they actually want from you. So let's start going through this. So the first question is, what is the big burning question they ask you first? What is the big burning question they ask you first? Think of all of your dealings with clients, with customers, with anybody who comes to you for your expertise or your knowledge on something. What's the big burning question they ask you first? You'll see a pattern. So for me, for example, if I'll use myself as an example, the big burning question that most people ask me is it really worth it writing a book? I'm in a very unique position. With most other products, programs, services, you're kind of like trying to, I guess, convince people that what you've got is something that they want to do or want to achieve. I'm in a really good position in that most people want to write a book. I'm not saying everyone should write a book. There's some people I really think, my God, please don't write a book. We don't need to hear what's going on inside your brain. But most people, I think there was a statistic about 10 years ago that over 70% of Americans think they should write a book. And I'm thinking, dear God, we don't really need to know what 70% of Americans think. Probably the same in the UK. Do I really need to know what 70% of the UK thinks? Probably not. So I'm not actually saying everyone should write a book, but most people want to write a book. So that isn't the issue. Where the big burning question is with my audience is they know they're usually very busy. They're busy B Corp founders, they're social entrepreneurs, they are purpose-driven individuals. They're extremely busy. They want to write a book, but they're thinking, where am I going to find the time? And if I do find the time, is it going to be worth it? Is my return on my investments of time and energy and money going to be worth it? So that's a big burning question. So I'm very aware of that. And the reason why I was aware of that is because I started to speak to people in my audience, and that actually birthed my book. So originally, just to give you an idea, originally my book was going to be about how to write a book for thought leadership. It was basically going to be a book about a book, which sounds very meta, but it was going to be a book about a book. Okay. That's not what the Freedom Master Plan, my book, is about. Because after speaking to the audience, I realized quite early on that I'd missed, again, I assumed that was my mistake. Thank God I hadn't written the book. I hadn't even started. Imagine if I'd wrote the book because I assumed something. I didn't assume. I realized the big burning question that people have for me is it worth it? Like, what would I do with a book? I don't know. Like, is it worth me putting that time and effort and money into writing a book? Is it worth it? So guess what? My book was all about case studies of previous clients and the amazing things they've done with their books, showing people step by step the strategies and tactics that they used, so that people can read my book and go, oh, okay, I can do this in my business. This strategy would fit in with what I do. So you have to really think about, what is the big burning question they ask you first? What is it they want to know or do? Unless you're famous, then people are really, really not interested. Unless you have a really extraordinary life, like something absolutely extraordinary. I'm trying to think. There's really not very few people that I can think of who have actually, had extraordinary lives, and that in itself was enough for a book. Most of the books that people read, non-fiction, and they're not trying to know something or do something, is usually famous people, because people are nosy. They just want to know. Like, last year's biggest book was Prince Harry's. He's not even a prince anymore now. What do I call him? Harry? Just Harry on its own? I don't know. Is it just Harry? Nish is nodding his head. So I think it's just Harry. But it sounds really weird. It's like, if you say Harry, it just sounds like a neighbor that I'm talking about, So it's really weird saying Harry without Prince. But yeah, that was his autobiography, Spare. That was the biggest selling book in the world last year. Was that a book on how to be a prince, or should be how to leave the royal family? Of course not. People weren't interested in learning anything apart from just being nosy. They just want to learn about what's going on in his life and, his version of what happened and why him and Meghan left the country. They were just being nosy. Unless you have that kind of profile, then people really don't care about you. I'm sad to say, but people don't. All they really care about is they want to know or do something. So what is it they want to know or do? So with mine, the big burning question was, is it really worth it writing a book? My answer is yes. And I show them how they can leverage a book to build their purpose-driven business or organization. That ended up becoming the subject of my book, The Freedom Master Plan. So you can but with these two questions, if you really drill down, it's amazing how it will change even what your book is about. It changed my book completely. I was going to write about how to write a book for thought leadership. I ended up writing a book about how to leverage a book for thought leadership. See how that was a complete change in the content? So that's how important it is that you ask these questions. Ask yourself, what are the 5 common follow-up questions that they have? You'll see a pattern as well. When people speak to you, people are not as unique as they think they are. We all like to think we're so unique, and we are, from a DNA point of view and a thumbprint point of view, but actually far, far more similar than we are different. Far, far more similar than we are different. So you'll see patterns. What are the common follow-up questions that people ask you? So for me, it tends to be, okay, a good follow-up question I get is, it's going to take me a long time, isn't it? It's going to take me several months. I don't have several months to be able to write a book. That tends to be a follow-up question. Is it going to take me a lot of time? The other thing is it going to disrupt my life? I'm very busy. I have young children. I have a business. I have a partner. I have other commitments. There's a set of follow-up questions that I always get. It doesn't matter who I'm speaking to when it comes to books. They ask me pretty much the same thing. So again, think about what the 5 common follow-up questions are. And guess what your book needs to do? It needs to answer those questions. Simple as that. A lot of people think it's like there's such a mystery in writing these books. It really, really isn't. It's a case of just going to your audience finding out the answers to these questions, and then delivering that in your book. And it's as simple as that. People think like there's like some kind of, hidden secret. It really, really isn't. Another question: what is specifically holding them back from achieving their desired result, and why? There'll be something that's holding them back, and you need to address that in your book. That's how you get 4 and 5-star reviews, when people feel like you're directly speaking to them and they feel understood. So for my audience, just to give you an example, what's specifically holding them back? Well, one of them is time. They feel like it's going to be very time consuming. They feel like they need to give themselves 2 weeks off and go into a log cabin or somewhere to go and write the book, but they can never give themselves 2 weeks off because they're busy individuals. And when they do have time off, their family wants to go on vacation with them. So the book that they wanted to write in 2018, they still haven't written because they still haven't found the time. So that could be something that's holding them back. And I talk about that in my book, how time actually isn't an issue. It's because that planning is the issue, and that's what's taking time. And I show them how to plan a book so they can actually write at speed. Another something that's specifically holding them back is some people don't know what part of their expertise to do. So they know so much. Maybe they've been in their industry for a number of years. Alan, you said that, your book, it sounds like it's going to be huge. And you're thinking, oh my God, it's going to be a behemoth and no one wants to read. Maybe I should split it up into 3 books. That's a genuine issue that people have. They just go, I've got all this information buzzing in my head, but if I just downloaded my entire brain, this book is going to be like Wikipedia offline. I can't do that to people. No one's going to want to read it. So that's something that's what people get confused. Like, how do I distill my information that's all in my head? How do I distill it and put in just what's needed in the book? And that confuses them. And that becomes a stumbling block. So again, ask yourself, what is specifically holding them back from achieving whatever it is that they want to achieve? Okay. Another great question: what myths do they believe that undermine their success, and what problems does that cause? This is a huge one. So I'll give you an example. I'll use myself as an example so you can see how that works perhaps in your industry. So a big myth in my industry, people wanting to write books, is that they feel they need to give themselves at least half a day off to write a book, because there's a belief that you need a train of thought. It's a big belief. That's why people do that. It's like, okay, I can write my book now. I even had one gentleman say that to me. He's like, I've already told my wife that I basically every Saturday for 8 hours, I'm going to work on my book. And I said, thank you, but I don't want to be responsible for you getting divorced. So you don't need to give me every Saturday to write your book. And I showed him my methodology, and he was able to write his book in between meetings and whenever he had time off. And his wife was very grateful because she didn't lose her husband for about 6 months every Saturday. But that was a myth. And I realized most people think that. They think I can't work on my book when I've got half an hour to spare. It'll take me that long just to find my train of thought again. It's a myth. And if you actually follow my methodology, you can literally write your book when you've got 15 minutes to spare. You can be adding extra text to your book and then get back to whatever it is that you want to do. So think of the myths. And again, I talk about that in my book. I talk about how it's not about having a train of thought, how you can actually create your train of thought in the planning stage, so that when it comes to writing, you no longer need to keep on your train of thought. So think about the myths. What myths do they believe in your industry that undermine their success? And then blow those myths out of the water in your book. Again, a wonderful way to get 5-star reviews. When again, they feel like you're speaking to them. Like, oh my God, I believe that. But this person is now telling me, wow, that's a myth. There's a way around this, and I didn't know. It's one of the key ways of getting 5-star reviews. Do they need to understand everything before giving it a go, or just the next step? This is huge. This is a big one. And with all of these questions, by the way, don't guess them. Actually, let me just give you that as a caveat before I move on. I have had clients in the past where I've set them these questions, and then they've gone off, and I guess they just put in what they believed. And when I've then questioned them on it, there's like, yeah, I think that's true. It's like, what do you mean you think that's true? Either it's true or it's not. We can't move forward unless I know that this is a truth of your audience. And I guess sometimes people feel, I don't know, maybe I should ask you guys, do I look like a stern headmistress or something? I think I look quite friendly, to be honest. But maybe sometimes I give off, you're both smiling at me. Maybe sometimes I give off the vibe of a stern headmistress. But I've had clients who've written, just putting something, you do that in an exam. For example, if you don't know the answer to an exam, you've probably done, it was many, many years ago and I did exams at school. But when you don't know the answer to something, you might as well put something in there, because if you don't put anything in there, you're getting a big fat 0 for that question. So you might as well put something in there. Maybe you'll get half a point for, I don't know, showing willingness or something. But that's not what this is. I'm not going to come to your house and mark you with a big red pen. So if you don't know the answer to something, or you think you know, but you're not sure, go and ask your audience. Go and ring up a few of your favorite past clients and get them on a Zoom call with you. Or if you've got a sizable following on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever, stick a poll up or just ask a question and see who responds. But actually go and canvass opinion. Don't just guess. Don't just put something in there. It's like, oh, I might as well put something in there, because I'm not going to come and mark it. It's not for my benefit you're doing it, it's for your benefit. So whatever you do, all of these questions, that's the extra caveat there. If you don't know the answer, or you think you know the answer, but you're not 100% sure, go and ask. That's some of the best research you'll ever do. Okay, so do they need to understand everything before giving it a go, or just the next step? This is a big one. So I learned in my industry, people need to understand everything before they'll even start. And because I found this out, again, I asked my audience. And because I found this out, not only did it help me when I wrote my book, it helped me with the way I offer my entire program. I noticed that people are not interested in writing a book unless they see the whole plan. They don't need to see every little bit, but they need to know that I'm there with them for the entire thing. So I found very early on, in the beginning, when I started consulting back in 2017, basically all I offered was my advice. I can show people how to write a book. What I realized very quickly is the audience are not interested in that. They say, okay, well, you help me write a book, and then what? Well, I need to find my own editor. I need to find I don't know how to do any of that. And I found it very, very difficult to find people to work with me, because they just thought, but you're only taking me less than halfway in my journey. And then I've got to do all the publishing side of it that I don't understand. I realized very early on that people are not interested in writing a book unless they know they've got someone to help them write it, but then they've also got someone who's going to organize the sort of editing and the design and all that stuff that they don't understand. And additionally, they want someone to help them with the marketing and the leveraging so they know what they're doing with it. They need to have an idea of the entire process before they'll even take the first step. But then there are other industries where people are not the same. In fact, giving them everything is overwhelming. So let me give you an example. Let's talk about running. Okay, so say you're a couch potato, you've never ran anywhere, and running for the bus makes you out of breath. Okay, now imagine you see a book and it's like, this book, once you read it, you'll be able to run a marathon. You just scoff at it. You just be like, I've never run anywhere in my entire life. I don't want to know how to run a marathon. I would just like to know the steps so I can just run for a mile without dying. That would make me happy. So definitely in fitness, and you'll notice this in fitness, whether it's in books, whether it's in programs or services, people, they tend to give you just what you need to get to the next step. So if you're a complete couch potato, you'll read a book and it'll be just literally, how can I get, that book would be aimed for people just to get them up and walking every single day. That is a win for them. And then the next step after that might be they can do like a fun run for 2 miles in the park. And that would be it. So in the fitness industry, you'll notice that people don't want to see the entire, they don't, if they're literally starting from zero, they're not going to pick up a book or go into a program or hire a personal trainer who promises them that they're going to be a marathon runner now. That's overwhelming. The idea of going from zero to that is just huge. So they won't even do it. They need to be given just incremental steps. So you need to figure out in your industry, which one is it? Do they need to understand everything? Or do they just need the next step? That's going to be huge for your book, because your book needs to understand that. My book gave an overview So people understood what was necessary, what was important regarding writing it, what was important regarding publishing it, and also how to use it. In fact, that was the biggest thing of my book, how to leverage your book. If you're in an industry where it's more incremental, then you need to think about, well, which increment do you want to focus your book on? And that doesn't mean you can't write about the entire journey, but maybe you want to think about doing different books. So you can do different books at different levels. But certainly you don't want a book with the entire thing in it because it's not going to work. Yeah? Are they disciplined and committed or disorganized and wavering? This is a big one. How can they be held accountable? I've noticed something in my industry. So I work with founders, CEOs, people who are disciplined and committed. And yet when it comes to their books, oh my God, I see the other side of them. I think all of their discipline and commitment is towards their business. So they don't have much left over for their books. So I tend to find the more disciplined and committed my clients are with their businesses and their purpose and their mission, which they are, of course, they're all mission-driven entrepreneurs and non-profit leaders, they can be quite disorganized and wavering when it comes to their books. So I make sure I hold them accountable. Now you're probably thinking, okay, well, that's great, Mitali, within your program, but how do you do that in a book? Well, actually, in your book, you can actually guide them to do things. So you'll notice at the end of my book, every single chapter has a quiz. And it gets them to stop and think, actually, did I take any of that in? How many times have you read something and you just read it, but you didn't even understand it? You just kind of read it and glossed over it. We do this a lot, by the way. We do actually just read things. And then I've done this many times when I read something and go, I didn't get any of that. I just literally read through it, but my mind was elsewhere. And now I need to read the entire passage again. So you can even put quizzes or things that they have to do inside your book that actually stops them in their tracks, stops them being a zombie and just reading it like a zombie, but instead actually go and do something, whether it's do a quiz to make sure they actually absorb that information, or whether it's to go and do an exercise with some information that they've learned in that chapter, whatever it is, you can do that. So this again helps your book. And this again is one of those ninja tricks, if you want to call it that, of how to get 5-star reviews. There's so many books out there. A book that really gets 5-star reviews is one where people actually feel like, oh, this has actually helped me because I'm actually gone and done something with it. One of the nicest reviews I got from my book, it's still on Amazon, that review, and it's like, I felt I was in a workshop with Mitali. That was one of my favorite reviews that I got for my book. This person got my book. I don't even know them, but they actually wrote, I felt I was actually in a workshop with Mitali. A book made her feel like she was in a workshop. Do you know how huge that is? Most books people just passively read. You don't want your book to be something that people passively read. You want it to be something that makes people go and take action. And a great way to do that is to realize, okay, my audience is a bit disorganized and a bit wavering. They'll read this book, they'll think it's great, but they won't do anything with it. How do you get them to do it? Or you might not. You might have a very disciplined and committed audience. In that case, brilliant. You don't have to do anything like that. You know that you can just put all of your information in there and people will read it and actually go and do it. But you need to ask yourself, who is your audience? Are they disciplined and committed? Or are they like my audience, disorganized and wavering? So as I said, because you're coming today, you will get this workbook. So all of these questions are going to be in this workbook, plus a few more that I haven't covered today. And like I said, it's fillable workbook. So go through it. But as I said before, I'm not going to come around to your house and mark it. So don't just put stuff in there. Nish is laughing because he's probably thinking, yeah, I was going to do that actually. I'm not going to go around and mark it, Nish. So I'm not going to see this. So if you don't know the answer to any of this, or you have an answer, but you're not 100% sure if it's right, go and ask. Pardon me, got a frog in my throat. Go and ask your audience. One of the nicest things you can do is just actually contact a client from the past and say, hey, I'd love to just jump on a Zoom call with you. I'd just love to ask you, your thoughts when you were working with me. What did you think? Most people love that. So do that. Go and speak to previous clients or people that you've had dealings with. Well, as I said, if you've got an audience on social media, you can actually put a poll up or put a question up on social media and see who responds. But don't, whatever you do, don't just guess this. This isn't an exam where I'm going to come and mark it and you just think, well, I best put something in here because I might as well put something in here. That's not what it's about. It's really understanding your audience. And then when you've done that, you'll have a second workbook, which also Joyce will send you at the same time tomorrow. They will show you how to reduce all those questions down into this one pager. So you'll get an example. So I've got an example in there. And then you'll also have a fillable section where you can create your reader persona. And then I urge you, once you've got that, either print it out, or you can do what that gentleman did, make it into a screensaver if you want, or just put it somewhere. I don't know, maybe even put it, if you've got a fridge magnet, put it on your fridge. I don't care. But somewhere where you'll see it, if not every day, you'll come across it again and again. The problem with this kind of exercise is people do this and then they forget it. And then it doesn't have the power that it needs to have. Most people do it usually when they're setting up a business, and they'll do it, with a branding expert, and they'll help the branding expert work out things like logos and colors. And that's all important. But really understanding your audience is something that you should utilize in every avenue of your business. It's not just your colors and your logo. That's just the window of your business. It's how you operate and how you speak to your audience, especially now if you're starting to use AI as well, which I'm a big, I've started to really use AI now. And I've noticed the information, how good the information, the output is you're getting from these large language models is dependent on how much context you feed it with your audience and your business and who you are and your mission. So it's now become even more important that you get these kinds of personas and you really understand who you're speaking to if you're going to get the best output from AI. Okay, so it's actually become even more important that you do this. Okay, so let me come out of this. I'd love to know your thoughts. Hello, Stanley. I hope you're doing well, my love. Thank you for joining me. Oh, today your mic seems to be having a delay. Oh, am I echoey, guys? Why am I echoey? That's so. I'm sorry about that. I don't know why.
Treadmill. We can hear the treadmill.
Oh, is it my treadmill? Maybe I need to stop my treadmill then. That's interesting. I'm always on my treadmill, but you guys have never really heard it all so loudly. But I'll come off my. There we go. I'll stop my treadmill. But that's really, really odd. Sorry about that. But were you able to hear me enough so you understood what I was talking about? I'd be mortified now if you said, no, I didn't hear a thing. And it's like, oh my God, I've been speaking for about half an hour. I can't do all of that again. Thank you. Thank you for joining us, Sandy. Okay, so Nish, you said creating user personas using AI for your book and using multiple sources. Okay.
So if I just give you the context on that
yes,
briefly, I'm using AI to create my personas. I have a virtual space and a Bayer room, if you will, a canvas, and on there, part of that is the personas that I'm using. Is there automated prompts that you would recommend firstly to create the personas? And then the second part to that question is how do you categorize books that are intentionally using multiple personas? So for example, when you're reading Harry Potter, that's either a kid's book or an adult's book. Lord of the Rings is a kid's book or an adult's book. Like how are we able to meld those personas
I love
together?
this question. Thank you for asking this. Okay, so it was a two-part question. So actually, let me answer the first one. Regarding the persona, it's, with AI, I'm realizing, that old 1950s quote, garbage in, garbage out. People who get garbage output from AI, they're putting garbage in and they're blaming the AI. And it's like, it's not the AI's fault. You're feeding it with garbage. That's why it's spouting garbage, So in fact, what you can do is, if you want to do a little bit of experiment for me, Nish, is you could potentially do workbook 1, which is get all the information from your audience, and then feed that information into ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, whichever LLM you use, and that should do workbook 2 for you. So whereas in workbook 2, obviously I created that workbook before ChatGPT graced us in November 2022. So what my clients before November 2022 were doing, they were taking all of that information and they were having to condense it themselves into a one-pager, into a persona. Now what my clients are doing is they're just feeding it into ChatGPT or Gemini, whichever one they use, and it's condensing it for them. So you can do that, but you still need to, the main thing with AI You can use it for research. However, nothing's going to beat the research of your actual audience. So I have started to experiment using AI, and I ask it questions regarding what do thought leaders think and that sort of thing. And it is quite interesting what it comes up with. But I'm still not sure if I 100% will go with just what it's telling me. Because, well, even a phrase like thought leader, that means a lot of things to different people. Someone that I think is a thought leader, you might disagree and say, I don't class that person as a thought leader. There are some people that will say influencers are thought leaders, but there'll be other people who will laugh at that. Be like, an influencer selling me makeup on Instagram is not a thought leader. But it's like, well, she is having thoughts on blusher. She's having thoughts on how to do your eyeshadow in 2024. So that is a thought, and she's influencing loads of people. So isn't that a thought leader? So we have different, so you have to be very wary. It's all about garbage in, garbage out. And you can never, ever beat your actual audience, actual people you've worked with or you're currently working with or looking to work with you in the future, the audience that follows you on social media. That's real human beings. Whereas what AI is doing is getting an idea of who these people are and working out what they think. So I'm not sure. You can certainly do that. But I mean, see how far you get, and it'll be interesting. Stay in touch with me and let me know how you go. You can feed questions in workbook 1, feed them into AI and see what it comes with. But you'll have to, the problem with that is you'll have to guide it so much that you probably could have just answered the questions yourself by just speaking to people that you know. Do you know what I mean? I don't see, at the moment, I'm not sure how that's going to save you time. Where the time saving comes is once you've done that work. So for example, for me, I've got the paid version of ChatGPT and the paid version of Gemini. What I've done is all this information is already in, I fed that information. So now using that information, I can then get it to create things for me.
Okay, I'll take this. It does. I'll take this offline with you because I've just kicked off a project this week, which is probably saying good for you to look at. But in previous iterations of stuff like this, I've been feeding the AI the problem, as in what I'm trying to achieve, and it's been coming up with stuff which is pretty ballpark to me going out and finding the people that I'm looking for. It's making suggestions. So I'll take this offline with you, but I'll show you where we're at. But it's quite interesting approach. I'll pick that up with you. What about the second part?
Okay, so using multiple tones. So you gave some really good examples here. So Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. I'm not sure. I mean, I can't be sure. I'm not best friends with J.K. Rowling, so I don't know. But I don't think she wrote the book for adults. She wrote it for children. It just happened to also be something that adults were interested in. And I always use the example of Coca-Cola. I don't think they're great in terms of, ethics or business or anything like that, but they're a really good example regarding how they advertise. So you'll notice a Coca-Cola, apart from at Christmas or in the US around Thanksgiving, they will do adverts where it's all about, the family getting together and they're all drinking Coke, and it's all, they're trying to basically say, hey, we're part of the family kind of thing. The rest of the time, especially the diet versions, tend to always be centered around attractive people in their 20s, despite that everybody drinks diet. In fact, I would say there's more of a cause for people of my age to be drinking Diet Coke, because we find it more difficult to keep the flab off us. When I was in my 20s, I could eat whatever I wanted and there wasn't an issue. So really, from a target market point of view, you would think they'd have more people in the 40s and 50s, and yet they always, and the reason they do that deliberately, because they want to be seen as cool and part of the youth, because they know that older generations will probably want that anyway, even though they don't have it anymore. So there's still, does that make sense? Something like Coca-Cola, which everybody drinks, children drink it, pensioners drink it, and everyone in between drinks it. Well, I don't, because I've seen what it does to a penny, so I've stopped drinking it a while ago. But people who are not all that health conscious of all generations are drinking it. And yet, if you look at the adverts, apart from Thanksgiving and Christmas, when they do make it about the family, the rest of the time, they tend to center it around attractive 20-somethings. And yet everyone drinks it.
Natalia, you don't look a day over 20 anyway, so that's a different
Oh, thank you.
conversation.
Thank you.
But Coke is great for cleaning up your sink as well. So I think it's got a
Oh
different
yeah,
target.
and I've used it to descale my kettle all the time. It's honestly, pour a can in and then put it on, make sure it doesn't overboil because then it just starts foaming everywhere. But stick it on to heat and it gets rid of all the lime scale. That's why I don't drink it, because I just think if that's what it's capable of doing to my kettle, what on earth is it doing to my insides? But I hope that answers your question. So
It does.
you're saying multiple personas. It isn't actually multiple personas. I actually think J.K. Rowling, and I've forgotten who wrote Lord of the Rings, they actually wrote it for older children. But then
Well,
it had
that's interesting.
crossover appeal.
Because I'm not sure if Tolkien did. I'm not sure if Tolkien was looking at it as a kid's book. He created a
Yeah,
universe.
maybe he didn't. I don't know. I'm not. I'm gonna you're probably gonna hate me for this. I was never a huge fan of Lord of the Rings.
Sure.
Harry Potter, yes, but I was never a huge fan of Lord of the Rings. But yeah, I
But
don't know.
I think you're answering my question in that you start with one persona and it organically filters into another. So you've got to pick one of the two.
Yes,
And
because otherwise it's just so confusing when you have more
which
than
is
you can have. I have had clients who've had like a secondary persona, but the secondary persona was 60-70% the same as the first persona. It was just slightly different and it worked. When you have two, even just two completely different personas, you feel split in how to word things, how to say things. It just becomes extremely difficult. I mean, that's why, for example, I always, on my LinkedIn, on my website, I talk about, I work with B Corp founders, I work with social entrepreneurs, I work with, I work with ethical business owners. But then every so often, I will get somebody who doesn't actually fit those entirely, and yet they're purpose driven in another way. Now you might say, well, maybe you're missing those people. Well, no, the people who resonate with me, even when they don't specifically fit, they will just resonate anyway. So it's a bit like, I think a good friend of mine, Jill Tiny, Stanley knows Jill quite well. Jill said, Jill said something, I'm probably misquoting her, but she said something, it's about targeting your party, but everyone's welcome to the party. I think that's the best way to see it. You're just targeting people, but you're not now saying that anybody outside of that can't join in. If they still resonate with you, they can still join. Just like in my business, I target B Corp founders, social entrepreneurs, ethical business owners. That's my target. However, I do also work with people who fall outside that remit, but they are purpose driven in another way. So I'm not being exclusionary. So that's the same way to think about your book. Think of a persona, the people that you're going for. Or in your case, it'll be children that you're going for, because obviously you're writing a children's book. But you're still welcoming other people to the party. If other people are interested, and that's great. But it just
and that's the interesting thing with kids' books as well. I have to work with two, because I have to work with the user, which is the kid, but the customer, which is the parent who's going and buying the book in that particular instance. They're the ones that are shedding the dollars to buy the book.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I would say, well, is that?
Well, I'm just working through that myself, so I can take that offline with you. But it's just, who am I writing for? Am I writing for something that appeals to the parent, going, "Hey, that would be good for my kid to read," or am I writing something for the book for the kid that says, "I want that book to read"?
This is really interesting, because this is something I'm not an expert, an expert in. I've never written a children's book, and none of my clients have written children's books. So that's an interesting one. I would hope that you need to get a marriage of the two. The two things shouldn't be separate, because obviously for the book to be read in the first place, it needs to appeal to the parents. But if the child doesn't want to read it,
it could be an instructional book, and moving into non-fiction, it could be how to program a computer, and that parent would go, I want my kid to learn coding. So it's different stuff, but I'll take this offline with you, because I'm working through it and I'm having fun doing it. So I don't have the answers, but I'm enjoying finding.
You're enjoying the process. Excellent. Any other questions, Alan or Stanley? Do you have any questions? Alan, I answered your question earlier on. Did that give you an understanding of what you can do with your book?
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so you guys have already had a book idea audit with me, but there will be people on replay who may want to book on review. So let me just quickly show you how to do that. So let's just go back to, here we go. Okay, so this is just to give you an idea of, actually, Isla, this is a lady. So here we go. I'm actually practicing what I preach. So I actually have a meeting with Isla tomorrow. We've got a half an hour chat on Zoom booked in. This is a lady who went through my program, about 18 months ago now. She, as you can see, she says it's made for a busy working adult. She was really struggling to write a book because she's got 2 young kids, and she has a day, what she did at the time, she had a day job, and she was building a fledgling coaching business and 2 kids. So she was just like, oh my God, I don't have time to write a book, until she saw my methodology. It's like, oh, I didn't realize I can actually just write this book whenever I've got spare time. And she didn't realize she could do that. But just showing that I practice what I preach, I have a half an hour phone call with her tomorrow. And the reason is just to catch up and see what she's doing with her book. And because things might have changed for her, I want to know how she's leveraged it. She's my audience. And guess what I'm going to be asking? I'm still going to be asking some of the questions that you saw today. So it's like, how was it like working with me? And how have you leveraged your book? And she's my audience. And this will help me moving into the future with my programs and any books that I write. So do join me for a book idea audit. It's in 2 parts. The first part is we will look at your book ideas and make sure it will be successful. This is really important. Sometimes people come to me with a book idea and I just say, this is not the right book idea for you. I mean, if you just want to write it, go ahead and write it. But if you actually want a book to be successful, you need to be in the right place in your life and in your business. And then the topic has to be right. So I can decipher that for you. And I promise to be honest and let you know whether your idea is good or not. And if it's not a good idea, we can even brainstorm good ideas. And then we'll also look at what process will help you succeed. That might be working with me. It might not be. So for example, Nish, I'm more than happy to help him as much as I can regarding this book. I can definitely give him advice regarding typesetting and design and that sort of thing. But actually writing the thing, I haven't got a clue when it comes to children's books. So it could be that I then refer him on to other people who are more knowledgeable in that area. So we will look at the process that will help you succeed. So let me show you how to do that. So all you have to do is go to this link, which I will send to you. Do have a listen to this video. It's only 5 minutes long, just gives you a deeper dive on what we'll be able to cover. And then you just pick a date that works for you. And you know how this works. Just fill in your details and it will go into your calendar and to mine. So I would hope to see you at a book idea audit very, very soon. Okay, so let me just come out of this. So Nish says, can I book the second part of the audit with you soon? Yes, you can. Sorry,
go ahead.
No, sorry, Nish, what were you going to say?
I was going to say you already answered my question. You said you're going to send out the link. So
yes, you'll get the link via email with your workbooks tomorrow, Nish. And do let me know how things go with using AI. Definitely, I mean, what my clients are now doing is they're just feeding all the information they get into the workbook, and workbook 2 is done for them. They just get AI to create a persona, which is really, really good. Okay.
Cool. I'll actually do a show and tell with you when I book the thing. I'll show you what we've got.
Excellent. All right. Any final questions or thoughts? That's great. Well, thank you so much for coming today. I really appreciate it. I hope you got something out of it. Keep an eye out for the workbooks tomorrow. Joyce will send it out to you. Tomorrow should be mid-morning or early afternoon UK time. So Stanley, for you, will be very early in the morning when you get it. All right. Thank you so much. Hope to see you at a future forum. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.